Welcome
to the joy of coding.
Hello, I forgot to hit record. I'm going to do that again. I did that last week as well. I don't know what's wrong with me. Let me try it one more time.
Welcome
to the joy of coding.
Hello, and welcome to episode 427 of The Joy of Coding. My name is Mike Conley. It's so good to have you here. We are going to be chatting about and working on some Firefox stuff live here on the stream. So thanks for being here. Let's get started. Why delay? So I'll start by sharing my screen. This is today's agenda. Yeah, it's episode 427. A reminder, no plan survives breakfast. I think I know what I want to do. I think I know roughly how things are going to go, but they might not. It might go sideways. It might go south. It might go horribly wrong, and that's okay. We're going to deal with things as they come. That's the first thing. Second thing, the agenda that we're looking at is available to you. It's going to be in a different place depending on where you're watching the stream. If you're watching this on YouTube, check out the video description down below. If you're on Twitch, check out the channel details. And if you're on Air Mozilla, check out the details section over there. There should be a link to the agenda. And as I maybe add things to it or add links or update it, this little spinny will spin. And then if you reload, you'll get the most up-to-date version. Let's just get started. Yeah, normally I've been, starting these episodes with a brought to you by HTTP error code, but today, as it happens, it's like this doesn't happen too often, but there's no error code for 427, or at least there's not officially one that I'm aware of. I did happen to Google around HTTP error code 427. There's the list of HTTP status codes, and 427 was not in here. There's a notable skip there. But if you Google around, the AI overview says it's like unassigned, but some applications might use it. Here's a blog that's like, understanding the HTTP response code 427 flow token expired. So that's not official. That's some custom stuff from heltar.com. And yeah, this is .com monitor says 427 is currently unassigned. So this happens every now and then, I guess, where they skip one. They didn't go to 427, they went straight to 428. Maybe they thought 427 was going to be used for something, and they're like, okay, well, you can have that one, we'll take 428. I actually don't know how the assignment goes, because if you look, there are little gaps all over the place. There was that earlier gap, which was, I think, 40... Where was that first gap? 404, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, 19, 20 are gone. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 6, 7. The 27, 427 is the one we're talking about today. And then we have some more gaps coming up. 430 is missing. And then everything from 431 to 451, not inclusive, is missing. So I guess they're like budgeting room. I don't know why they dedicated 451 for unavailable for legal reasons. Oh, I see. The code 451 was chosen as a reference to the novel Fahrenheit 451. That is hilarious. So one thing you can be sure of is every now and then programmers are silly, and even though, standards bodies are they seem really serious and this is like the network that the world uses, and like it is a very serious place, and we have the various working groups that are full of very smart people. Every now and then they'll do a joke like this, or like, where's the teapot one? I'm a teapot. 418 classic. I'm a teapot. There you go. That's the missing error code, 427. What do I want to look at today? Well, the first thing is I have a patch that has been reviewed. It has a little bit of review feedback, but it was review feedback. It was like the patch was approved with comments. And I wanted to take a quick peek at those review comments, investigate some of the ideas that were being batted around there. I'll quickly describe the bug. So this is bug 2008221. If you go there, actually, let me put a link to that in the agenda so you can follow along. Whoop. Okay, and so spinny spins. And I might as well do it for this one as well, for later. All right. Sorry, I wanted to go back. This is the bug. You could reproduce this in Nightly right now. Let me actually see what I have. Let me check out main. Let's just do a build, an artifact build. I can reproduce the issue in my local Nightly, but I also have like the redesigned settings enabled, which Nightly does not. And I want to show you what actual Nightly's settings looks like. So, oh, you know what else I could do is I could just like pop open a different profile. Temporary. This is my temporary profile. Excuse me. So if you go to settings, you may be in a region where payment methods autofill is enabled. That's not true for all regions. I guess there's some regions where we haven't got the rules right yet. But for many regions, we have form autofill for payment methods. That's like credit cards and stuff. And that's here under privacy and security under payment methods. And, you know, I had to know to go look for that. But there is a search input up here. And that's how oftentimes people seem to find things. It's not super surprising, is they use the search input. And now what is the sort of thing that one might type into here to find their credit card information? Well, maybe they type in credit card. Nothing shows up. Why is that? Because we don't use the terminology credit card. We use the term payment method because there may be other different there might be things that are not credit cards that we want to also store in this mechanism. So we called it payment methods and not just credit cards. But that means that a very common string that people are going to type in the search input is not going to match. Now, we actually have a mechanism in place for that exact thing. We just needed to get the strings that from our content designers. These are content designers are the people who develop the strings that show up in Firefox to make sure we have sort of like a consistent voice, consistent rules for grammar, et cetera, et cetera. And these were the names that they suggested to show, to match on. Credit, cards, debit, wallet, checkout, or any variation therein. And so I wrote a patch. It's a very small patch that does that. I realize now I shouldn't have done this artifact build. I want to do another artifact build with the fix in place. So we'll look at the patch while that's building. This is kind of annoying. Hold on. JJ Log, take so long. What are you doing? Okay. JJ New, NKO. All right, and then we'll build and we'll take a look at the patch. So the patch is very small. We add a string to the form autofill preferences file that is a comma separated list of things to match on. And I did all of the variations. I did credit cards, debit, wallet, and checkout. And then we add it to this list of LTN IDs that are assigned to the payment methods section for matching on, for doing search matching on. So that's great. But my colleague Heist pointed out that the commas may actually be doing something. That if we get rid of the commas, if we just do credit, cards, debit, wallet, checkout, then we'll match on all of them, all the variations too. Like we'll get credit cards for free if we get rid of the comma separation. So I want to test that, see if that's true. So let me demonstrate what he's talking about. So this, I've shown you the bug. Now I'm going to show you the fix that I wrote, which was now you can type in credit cards and it matches. But if you type in wallet cards, it doesn't. Now, no one, I think, would really type wallet cards, but I think Heist's suggestion is if you get rid of the commas, then each of the individual space separated items should match. And or at least that's the claim. He's asking whether or not that's the case. So I want to find out. So let's go ahead and make that change and see if we can figure it out. Whoops, form autofill. So we're gonna get rid of the commas, and then we're gonna get rid of the extra terms. So the extra terms are cards here, credit, cards, debit, wallet, checkout. That was the full list, I believe. Cards, credit, debit, wallet, checkout. So I'm going to put it in that order just to make it easier for people to audit. And then let's build this and see if Heis is right. I hope he's right, because that would be great. And then our localizers, their job is going to be to find the right search terms that make sense in your other regions for things like a credit card. Maybe there's a different term in your region. All right. So let's type in credit cards. Ah, see? No, that doesn't match. That doesn't match. Wallet cards. So spaces, unfortunately, spaces don't work. Now, if I had put credit cards here without the comma, I think that would match. So I'm going to respond to Heis and say that the commas are actually useful for visually separating these terms. Credit cards. Yeah, see, it matches. So let's respond. Let's respond. Do the commas actually do something in the settings search implementation? Be clear, fine to keep them, but if they don't do something, which I think is how search works, then perhaps we drop the substrings of other strings parts, so credit, debit, cards on their own. Probably doesn't matter either way, though, and it might be worth having the duplication in case of other languages. Cards on its own would be a substring of debit cards or something. So the problem here is that if we get rid of the substrings of other strings, then we'll match, for example, by having the autofill search term credit cards value be, and then let's put in cards credit. Then we will match on those individual terms, but will not match on combinations of them. So credit cards would not match. So the commas are helpful to break up these matching terms. So ultimately, I think the commas are helpful to break up these matching terms, rather than having credit cards, debit cards, wallet, checkout. So I'm going to land as is. Do. How's everyone doing out there? Is anyone on the eastern part of Canada or the United States and get absolutely obliterated by snow over the weekend like I did? I mean, I'm being dramatic. We just got quite a heavy snowfall on Sunday. We didn't get obliterated, but I've been doing a lot of shoveling. I don't know if anyone out there has also been doing a lot of shoveling, but my back and shoulders, I normally go to the gym on Mondays. And I didn't need to because, well, first of all the sidewalks were covered in snow. And it was very hard to get out of my neighborhood. But also, I did a lot of shoveling, so I felt like I didn't need to go to the gym. I'd done a lot of shoveling. Ottawa apparently got a fair amount. Yeah. And let's see what's like. This isn't part of the joy of coding, but like, let's do a quick check on what the daily weather is going to be in Toronto. For Toronto, -8. It's going to be cold. -8, -12. For you cats in Fahrenheit, that is -8 Celsius to Fahrenheit. That's 17.6, and then -12. That's 10.4 Fahrenheit. So hovering just above 10 Fahrenheit. And then I'm not seeing anything here about heavy snowfall. There's occasional snow I mean, this is pretty far ahead. I don't know how much I trust the forecast that far ahead. Still to this day, I think forecasting that far ahead is pretty dicey, but you never know. You never know. Maybe they were right. Maybe they've got it. Maybe they can see it coming. But I'm not seeing any like epic snowfalls coming our way. But over the weekend, they had like this big banner that was like, alert, heavy snowfall incoming. So everyone got their shovels ready. Okay, so that landing is queued. We're done. That is done. I think I wanted to spend most of the rest of the stream talking about a different bug. A bug that I was investigating on Friday. I want to talk about the patches that I wrote to fix the bug. I want to talk about the whole thing because I thought it was really interesting, and I think that it highlights there's a real subtlety. This is what one might call a very nuanced bug. I don't love that word nuanced because I don't feel like it says too much. The word nuanced is quite nuanced, but this bug was not obvious by any stretch of the imagination. And maybe by walking you through it, you'll see how it was not obvious. And then I will talk about how it works. And that might be interesting for you. Okay. So what's the story? Let's tell the story of this bug. This is the story of a crashing bug, a crash on startup bug. And it is new tab centric because some of you may know this. We've talked about it a little bit on the stream. New tab has this capability where we can train hop. So normally the trains, the nightly beta and release cycle, it's normally every 4 weeks, but some of the cycles are a little extended because of like holidays and stuff. But the trains generally run on time where beta goes to release, nightly goes to beta, and then we start a new cycle in nightly, and that's where we do our development. And we do that fairly regularly. But that's still very, in the best case scenario, when you're doing 4 week cycles all the way through, that's still anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks from engineering done on nightly to being in the hands of release users. If you land patches right at the end of a cycle, then you still have to go through the 4 weeks of beta. And if you land it right at the beginning of a cycle, you have to do all 4 weeks of nightly and then all 4 weeks of beta before it goes out into the hands of release users. Now there's an advantage to that, which is you get a lot of testing. You get people who are testing on nightly, you get a lot of testing on beta from people out in the wild. But that latency is something that the new tab team was trying to tackle last year. And the way we approached it was we made it so that we can update the new tab code base within Firefox out of band from the rest of the browser. And that's by taking advantage of the extension mechanism. It is not a traditional extension. It's what we call a built-in add-on. So it doesn't have like the structure of a traditional web extension. It is not a web extension. It is not compatible as a web extension. You could not install it in Chrome or Safari or anything like that. It just uses the extension download, packaging, and install mechanism to update parts of itself. So that's the first thing you need to know, is that new tab can do that. The second thing you need to know is that last Thursday, we tried to do one. So there's actually already one on a release right now. If we open up Firefox, this is Firefox release, and I think I'm actually behind by a dot release. We just sent out a dot release yesterday. Update your dot release. This is also going to fix a weird Linux bug. It's fixing a Linux bug that prevents us from train hopping to Linux, actually, because of the XDG base directory thing. But I digress. That was a different issue. So this is Firefox 147.0.2, but this is new tab version. If we take a look at the troubleshooting information, new tab version 147. That's not right. Oh, you know what? I think I accidentally uninstalled it on this particular version. Let me let me get my original release profile open. Hold on. Sorry about that. I was looking at the wrong kind. Okay, so this is, again, 147.0.2. And if we look, I've got new tab version 148.0. Big old string of numbers. Side note, check out the nightly dialogue. I think there's an oopsie there. The nightly dialogue. I did notice that they put the they've restructured it. They've put in the name of the creator. They're attributing the organization that built the build in here. And they've also changed the word mark. Is that the oopsie? What's the oopsie? I wait to hear back. Yeah, there's an 148.0. Big ol' string of numbers. That's the version that's actually running out in 147 right now. So we were able to ship that to actually Firefox 146. So we were able to get in front of users on 146 like 2 releases faster, which is great. So we wanted to do another train hop last week on Thursday. It was going to be the first one of the year. And that was going to bring 149 some version number of new tab built from main to release. Smurfy says, "Oh, okay. I was thinking about the org.mozilla. Looks eh. Well, let's do a quick homework check here. See whether or not this is intentional. Maybe it's a bug. About dialogue dot xhtml. Let's look at the log. It actually has not been updated recently, the markup. So did about dialogue .js change? Add actual architecture name to the about dialogue, so people can tell whether it's x86 or ARM. That was from a year ago, though. Sorry, that's 2024. Yeah, that's interesting. Like, what? Now I'm curious. You nerd sniped me, Smurf D. Where is this coming from? We're going to choose the about dialogue. Distribution ID. Oh, maybe it's because we've assigned a distribution ID to our builds now. It's style block. And why? If distro about, if there is about text. So if I go to config, about config, distro, no. Oh, distribution about, distribution ID, org.mozilla, distribution.id. Did that get introduced? You know what? I suspect we have gotten a new distribution ID assigned. Let's see if anyone's filed anything about this. About nightly distribution. About dialogue. This was filed on Tuesday, 7 days ago. This is from Developer Edition 148. Wow. Okay, 140 ESR. See also. You know what? Let's file this. Let's file this just in case. We'll have the team triage it. Big gap in spacing in Firefox in about dialog for nightly. Defect, and we'll take a screenshot. Screenshot of nightly about dialog. There's a fairly large gap between the word mark and the new distribution ID that displays below it. It feels overinflated a bit. Maybe we can tighten this up. Is there value in showing org.mozilla on the nightly build? Okay. And then I will show what release looks like. So here's release for reference. Firefox 147.0.2 release about dialog on release for reference. All right, so we'll let the people triaging Firefox General figure out whether or not this is okay. So that was a little bit of a distraction, but filed this bug. Still a good thing to do. Copy. Okay. Let's move on. So new tab has this train hopping capability. That's the thing you need to know. And then last Thursday, we wanted to do one. So when we do a train hop, you don't just like willy-nilly build the XPI and just send it out. It has to go through a rigorous testing process. So for example, because we build it from the main, basically the nightly version of the browser, we build the XPI that's going to go out to release in beta. And after we build it and sign it, we have QA test it for a number of days. It takes them several days to actually do the full battery of tests on all 3 desktop platforms. Is a very in-depth testing battery of tests. And they caught some defects, but they weren't major defects. But they caught some things. And we decided we were okay to accept those defects and ship. So we shipped the we shipped it. We turned it on. But we did it to 25% of the release audience. So we went to release first. And that is normally how it goes. When we train hop to release first, and then we train hop to beta second. I know that seems a little backwards, but the reason for that is because train hopping to beta doesn't actually tell you whether or not the train hop will work on release. All that will tell you is that it works on beta. What will tell you if it works on release is people testing it on release. So that's why we have QA test it. What deploying it to beta tells you is what will happen if beta turns into release before we train hop again. That's why we deploy to beta, is to account for the app version upgrade. Okay, so we deploy to 25% of the release population, and everything seems okay. We update, everyone's testing it. It looks good. I go home for the day. I'm cooking dinner. Relaxing, and then all of a sudden I get a message. Our crash reporter team has noticed a spike in crash reports, and one of our release managers goes, I recognize that stack. That looks like it's related to train hopping. So this is the bug that got filed. Is a crash in Firefox on Glean. Glean is our telemetry ingestion mechanism, but in a method called create and register metric. So one of the things that NewTab does whenever it's deployed as an XPI is any metrics, new Glean metrics that normally would have landed inside of these like static YAML files, so that is declaratively you have the metrics kind of embedded and defined in the browser. We register them dynamically by reading in those YAML files, turning them into JSON, and shipping them with the XPI. And at runtime, opening up the JSON files with those metric definitions and registering at runtime using this create and register method, create and register metric call. Great. And we're crashing. And the reason we're crashing is because we're passing in a timing distribution metric. There was a timing distribution metric that we were adding, and it was not including the sort of the extra value of, what is it, the time unit. You need to supply the time unit. So we were failing to unwrap the time unit here, and we crashed. And that was very strange because we had seen this coming. We knew that we needed to supply the time unit. If we take a look at the metric definition itself, the metric definition includes the time unit here under extra args, and then this code, which ships with the XPI, it ships with the extension, and its job is to do the registration, has timing distribution under the extra args types allow list, which means that we go ahead and when we're registering, we allow extra args to be included, and we call register runtime metric with it. So what we were seeing in the crash reports was not matching what we thought we had shipped in the XPI. So what could possibly have been happening? The claim from the crash reports is a very strong claim. We're getting evidence rolling in from these crash reports. And let me give you a sense of what we saw, by the way, with these crash reports. Is it was a pretty, you can look at our crash stats. These are all, I think, like I'm logged in, but these are public. You can go to crash stats. And if you take a look at the top crashers for 147.01, it's us. We like rocket up to the top. We take a look at this graph. There's this huge spike. Just this was the day we started, and it like exploded. 30, and like this is the number of people who are submitting crash reports. So it's more than this. It's more than this. And so we're like, oh my goodness, shut it down. So thankfully the train hop mechanism has a shutdown. Like we can just sort of send out a signal. It's like, roll it back. Don't do it anymore. Go back to what you were doing before. And so we sent that signal, and it is still sort of like getting out there. You can see it is tapering off, but even now, like we're still getting a couple of hundred crashes because people maybe had downloaded the XPI and then shut down, and they're just starting up now and crashing. Like there's this long tail because there's like the whole restart thing. So we had, the first move was to mitigate the bleed, was to mitigate the issue. And we knew that we had that mechanism in place. So we did that right here. We're like, oh snap, throw the switch, shut her down. So we shut her down, and we start, over the weekend, we see it come down. Because this was on, I think this was Thursday, what is it, the 22nd? Let me look at the calendar. January 2026 calendar. Do I have these days right? 22nd was the Thursday, 23rd was the Friday. So yeah, it exploded on the Friday. We actually sent the signal to shut down on the Thursday. We saw it coming in on the Thursday. But this is in UTC, I think. So the switch over, yeah, all dates are in UTC. So the actual, the decision point at which we started to shut it down was like halfway through January 23rd UTC. It was actually late at night for me, later at night. Like I said, I was like cooking. So I like threw everything down. I come back online. I like shut her down, and I talked. It's like a double key sign off thing. And it starts coming down. So that's great. Now we have to investigate, like, what went wrong here? Because what we were seeing with our eyes, the data that we were getting was not matching what was in our heads. Our mental model said that what went out in the XPI should have worked. Because like QA tested it. We all tested it. We installed the XPI and it worked. So how could it be possible that this line be like missing and we're not passing the time unit? Or maybe it's how can it be possible that this line is missing just for some builds? That made no sense to us. And we're racking our brains and we're investigating. And then it occurred to me, we have something called a script preloader and a startup cache. So the script preloader and startup cache, they have some of the same, the one is kind of like used by the other, but I'm going to sort of like elide over a lot of the sort of the distinction between the two. And let's just say this. When you have a version of Firefox is a binary, it's an executable that also includes an asset pack. It's like a video game engine where you've got the engine and you've got the asset pack. That asset pack includes markup, scripts, CSS, images. That's where Firefox really, a lot of the front end is in the asset pack. It's called OmniJar or omni.ja. And whenever you if you're using the same OmniJar every time, it's a waste to like reparse and recompile that JavaScript every time if you know it hasn't changed. So we have this mechanism, and not just the JavaScript, it's also the markup and stuff. Like there are binary representations of the markup that we could cache, and then we don't have to parse them again and reinterpret them again. And so subsequent startups could be faster. And that we've had that for a long time. We've had these mechanisms for a long time. So what is the result? The result is you launch a new build of Firefox, it launches, it's never seen, the engine has never seen any of these scripts before, but what it does is it makes note of them, it makes note of the order in which they execute, and it takes the binary compiled versions of the markup and the scripts and everything that is sort of like generated, and then in the background it creates a optimized package of like a cache in your profile directory that's like optimized for the order that they were read in. And then on your subsequent startup, instead of reading from the OmniJar for a lot of those startup things, it'll read from the startup cache. So it checks to see if there are items in the cache, and if there are, with the same URI, it'll be like, oh, I'll just read it from the cache, and I've got this parsed JavaScript, or I've got this parsed HTML document representation, or XH or Azul representation, or what have you, and I'll like bring that back to life, and I can save some time. And that does work. That saves time, and it makes subsequent startups faster until your next major version upgrade. So the thing that cache gets invalidated on version updates or build ID changes because the OmniJar may have changed. It also gets invalidated anytime there's a crash. There are probably a couple other cases where it gets invalidated. But this cache is the key to everything, because the key insight to understanding what happened here is that the cache executes and only cares about stuff that executes during the startup window, like new tab. New tab starts itself up pretty early, and so the new tab XPI scripts in the parent process were being bytecode cached. They're going into the startup cache. And when we do a train hop, that's not a version upgrade. That's not a version upgrade. So the bytecode cache doesn't get invalidated. And the URI for the scripts doesn't change because the underlying the underlying XPI path in the file system is the same under the profile directory. So if the URI to the resource that we're accessing hasn't changed, and the build ID hasn't changed, and the app version number hasn't changed, then the engine thinks that the script for a URI for that XPI, if it's in the cache, then it's still good. And that's what was happening. People on the release channel who had cached versions of the new tab Glean utils script had an earlier version that didn't have this line. They probably had the version from the prior, they probably had, because like the prior build was from like 148, so it would have been probably, November. It would have been this one, which doesn't have timing distribution in extra args. So even though the script inside of the XPI has timing distribution in here, the engine goes, oh, this resource, the new tab Glean Utils resource, I'm going to go reach into the startup cache and execute that because I've got a copy. And it does. And then the timing distribution is not there. And when it comes to parsing the JSON file, which is in the XPI and is not cached because JSON files aren't cached, it finds the timing distribution metric. And then because it's not in the extra args include list, this part gets truncated out. And then we pass it to the Glean code, which explodes because it expects timing distribution to always have the time unit defined. And that's what was going wrong. So, and we were able to reproduce this. So, and knowing this also explained why we were not able to reproduce it during any of our testing runs. And the reason is because in order for the cache to be written, you have to do a restart, or to read from the cache, you have to do a restart with the new XPI installed, with the invalid, poison's not the right term, incorrect cache in on the disk. So you have to wait for it to have been written, which is writing that cache is a low priority thing. So what QA needed to have done, and what they have subsequently done, is they've added this to their manual testing toolkit, is you launch Firefox, you install the prior XPI, you restart so that it shows up, and then you wait for the startup cache to be written. Then you install the next XPI, and then you shut down, and then you launch. And when they did that with release, then they could reproduce the crash. And that's what was going wrong. And that's why they didn't catch it before, is because they... and none of us did. It's not QA's fault. This is an extremely subtle bug where you've got this sort of invisible performance optimization mechanism of the startup cache that from a JavaScript developer's perspective is completely you don't see it. It's transparent. You just try and get your resource and expect to get the right one. And this is kind of breaking one of the fundamental things of I guess of how NewTab was operating with this train hopping mechanism, which is that when we get a script from the XPI, we're actually getting it from the XPI. And it's just a thing we missed when we were developing this, because built-in add-ons, there aren't many of them. And we've probably been bitten by this forever. Anything where there's been a jar file, I'll bet you that this problem existed with old school Zool extensions. I'll bet you so much. I'm fairly confident that that's the case, unless for some reason old school Zool extensions would have caused the startup cache to get flushed. That's maybe possible, but any built-in add-on, even past Zool extensions or special add-on mechanisms where we're downloading a file to the profile, a jar file or an XPI file, and we're reading from it, and that thing might update this, and it happens during startup. This could have been a problem for years. So what do we do? Well, the good news is we discovered it. Because we've been train hopping since the end of 2025, but we've been hitting this bug. So people have probably been running with these weird half scripts that are half from the prior version and scripts that are from the new XPI. It's there's probably some weird behavior that's been experienced out in the wild because of this. So what we've done is we've paused all train hopping until we can get this fixed. And we can take a look at the patches now. The first patch, that's a long story. I hope that was interesting. Let me know if you've got any questions about that. Oh, this is the uplift one. Where's the main one? So you can see the review feedback. We can open up the review feedback here. Okay. So, system add-ons can be installed in the profile directory as XPI jar files that are updated independently of the application. Prior to this patch, when those jars are updated independently for the rest of the application, script preloader and startup cache can serve stale bytecode compiled from the previous version of the jar, causing the old code to execute even though the jar has been replaced. This fix adds a helper to check. Oh man, my grammar. To checking if a scripts jar file is one of the OmniJar files before using cached bytecode. Scripts from the OmniJar files continue to benefit from bytecode caching as before. Apologies for my bad. I'm just seeing that broken English. So what we did was we added a special utility to, I think it was startup cache utils. We run this function every time anytime something's going to try and read from the cache, and we can get the out param. Well, we can get the resource type that we're trying to access as an out param from this, and we have this enum of resource types, and the enum is like it's from the application OmniJar. Or sorry, application OmniJar. It's from the engine OmniJar, because there are actually two OmniJars. The engine ships one, that's, if you've ever seen us using like resource : // GRE, that's coming from this OmniJar. And anything that's like from resource : / or Chrome / browser stuff, that's coming from here. This is the engine stuff and like global stuff, and this is the application stuff. And then you've got like non OmniJar stuff and a couple of other different resource types. And we only allow GRE and app to use the caches now. That was the solution, is we put a bunch of guards around to make, and like a bunch of asserts. Like this is a runtime, this is a debug asserts that basically ensure that whatever we're trying to load from the cache is from either one of those two URI, has one of those two URIs as part of it. That's like a debug assert. And that fixed it. And then we wrote OmniJar. Where does that come from? Jar file format. A jar is a package file format. They're built on the zip format and typically have a jar file extension. I think it's because they're actually they're this format, and that's from back in the day. This is from before my time. I'll bet you this is from like a decision from maybe the Netscape or early Mozilla era to use this format for the assets. And Omni, I think it just means everything. So that's my guess for why they called the OmniJar everything jar. And then I added a test. I added a regression test. And this was remarkably difficult to test for because oh yeah, you know jar. Oh yeah, you know jar. Now, it's called an OmniJar, but actually the file doesn't have the R at the end of it. It's omni.ja. And I don't remember what the reason for that was. It was for a very particular reason. I think it's because I think there were certain pieces of security software that they would assume that jar files are executable. Because I think they kind of are. If you've got like the Java runtime environment installed, I think if you like double click on a jar, you can like that's almost like an executable. It'll launch whatever's got like public static void main inside of it. And I think that meant that there was security software that was constantly scanning the OmniJar, and that meant that sometimes we couldn't get a lock on it. So startups would be like startups wouldn't work properly. Like I think that it was something in that realm. Something was assuming that the OmniJar was an executable when it was not. And so we just renamed it to omni.ja, although it's still using the jar file format, I'm fairly certain. And you can open a jar file with zip. Like you can just rename the file name to like omni.zip, and you can open it up and look through it and see what is all up in there. It's basically a repackaging and reformulation of what's in the source code. It's all of our JavaScripts and stuff. All right, so what did I do for the test? I made it so that I could keep the script preloader active. One of the problems with the script preloader for testing is that it only is active for a very short window of time. And for marionette tests, and that's the test I ended up writing here, they can start executing after that window of time. So what I did was I added a preference that allows us to sort of like throw a monkey wrench in there that's like, okay, keep the script preloader running. Keep it so that it doesn't shut down, so that I can keep talking to it. And then I like wrote this big old blob of Python, it's this mess of like Python and JavaScript. but its job is to so what it does is it creates a jar file. It doesn't create the new tab or anything. It creates a jar file with a script inside of it. And the script looks like this. It just like exports a value. It's like a module that exports a value. And in this case, it's exporting the value from v1. And then I restart the browser and I set up a substitution so that the module can be loaded via test cache add-on /test.sys.mjs. So we load it, and then we read the value that comes back, and we should expect that the value is value from v1. And I wait for the cache to be written out, and then I shut down the browser. Because browser startup finished happens after the first paint, but the script preloader write out occurs after all of the idle jobs are done. So I have to wait for the idle jobs to be done. And then I quit the browser. I create a new jar, but at the same path. Same path. That's very important because the path, the jar file path is the URI that's being used for the cache. And I overwrite it with a new value so that it returns a new value. I start up the browser, I set up the substitution again, and I attempt to load the module, and then I ensure that the value I get is value from v2, not value from v1. And then I ensured that this test failed without the fix, and then it passed with it. So that's that. And those patches landed on Nightly earlier to... I think they've not even landed in Nightly. They went to Autoland just a few hours ago. 3 hours ago, and I have requested uplift to beta, so hopefully that fix will go to beta, and we might actually do another dot release. If we look at what train is it now, 147 has had 2 dot releases already. 147.0, 147.0.1, 147.0.2, and I believe there's going to be another one, because this is a sort of like a weirdly long cycle. It had a 4-week cycle on Nightly, but a 5-week beta cycle, and now it's getting like a 6-week release cycle. It's fairly strange, but long story short, we might do another dot release here, and then we can train hop. We'll probably start a little slower. We won't go straight to 25. We'll start at like 5 or 10%, just to be like, okay, for real, did the crash go away? Like, we are fairly confident that we fixed the crash that we identified. And I'm fairly confident that that's the one. And that's the only cause for the crashes. But we could be wrong. And so we're going to be a little more cautious. We're going to have QA test the whole thing again. And then we will we'll probably start with a smaller rollout of maybe 10% on release and just see. And if there are crashes again, we shut it down and we're back to the drawing board. And I really hope that doesn't happen, because there's a lot of good stuff that's awaiting to go out to the release channel and doesn't want to wait for the full train stuff. So that's the explanation. That's what happened. Does anyone have any questions about the problem or the fix or the investigation? Let me know. Let me know. And in the meantime, let's see if our patch landed for the credit card thing. It has not yet landed. I think the tree is closed for some reason. Tree is closed for Moki test failures. Moki test failures. Tree is closed, so Autoland will open again hopefully soon once the sheriffs find out what's caused the failures and they back it out. And with that, you know what? I might need to actually end the stream early. I know I normally go for a full hour and a half, I think, but today I have to prepare for some things that happen right after this meeting. So I'm gonna have to end the stream a little early. I apologize for that, but I hope this explanation was interesting. Let me know what you thought of the bug, the explanation. Hopefully we'll do a little bit more hacking next week. But let me know what you thought of this sort of deep dive explanation of what happened. I'm gonna put a link in the chat to link to rate this episode. You let me know what you thought. And we filed this bug. We hopefully have landed this thing. And we talked a lot about this crasher. and hopefully it gets uplifted all the way to release, and then we can start train hopping again. And with that, I'm going to close it out. Thank you so much for watching episode 427 of The Joy of Coding. Fill out the form, let me know what you thought. I read everything that comes in. Questions, comments, things you want to see more of, things you want to see less of. That's a great way of letting me know. And with that, I will hopefully see you next week. All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
The joy of coding.
See ya.